The truth is, I am not good enough to believe on Jesus in and of myself. The driving force in my life apart from God is what pleases me, what makes me comfortable, what I enjoy doing, what my flesh enjoys doing. And if we're honest this morning, what my flesh enjoys is going fishing rather than attending a Sunday service to worship God. Naturally, my flesh wants to get a bit more work done around the house or go see a local baseball game than to fellowship with believers on Wednesday nights. That's the truth. Maybe you could fill in some of the blanks on this with what feels best to you. Maybe it feels better to set the other person straight, laced with foul language, than being kind to others. Maybe naturally in your flesh, football is more important than church. Watching a movie is more important than reading the Bible. Taking the edge off with alcohol is more important than being sober for your family. And by the way, none of this is said to judge anyone, because I'm saying the same truths, the same principles are true about me. I'm talking about the way I am in the flesh. Naturally, I want what I want, and what I want is not the things of God. I am not good enough to believe on Jesus. So you can share all the logical reasons in the world why I should believe on Jesus. But without something more going on inside, I'm not going to trust. I might believe the things you're saying. I might believe that Jesus is Savior. I might believe that He is Lord, but I'm not going to go the next step of faith in Him, because that requires action based on that belief. There's a fancy theological word that describes what I've just described about us. We are totally depraved. Totally depraved. Depraved means morally corrupt or wicked. That's just the reality of who we are in our flesh. But there's a problem with that. The problem with all of this is that the end, the consequence, doesn't change just because we in and of ourselves do not want to change. You probably have heard the old saying, you can make your own choices, you can choose your own decisions, but you can't choose the consequences. The consequence remains the same. If I get drunk each week, my life and my family's life is going to suffer. If I lose my temper with others consistently, my reputation and my relationships are going to suffer. If I put fishing, football, and work before worshiping God, my spiritual life is going to suffer. And with all of this, I'm not prepared for the life to come, which is even worse than the earthly consequences from these things. You see, I am not good enough to believe on Jesus. None of us are good enough to do this in and of ourselves. On top of this, not only do we not have the moral ability to choose God, we can't earn our own salvation before God. There's nothing we can do to fix this in and of ourselves. So the question comes, what are we to do? If I can't save myself, how am I going to be saved? Well, there is good news that appears bad at first. What I have just said is the bad news. You see, we can't save ourselves, but salvation is not by ourselves, it is by faith in Jesus. And faith in Jesus is not man's work, but God's work. You can't save yourself You need God to save you. And the good news is God provided the means by which we can be saved. You see, there is only one way to have a place with God, one way to be forgiven of what is causing so much harm for our lives. That way was for one person who was morally perfect, who was sinless, to then offer themselves to die for everyone else who is sinful. There's only one person who could claim the ability to do that, and He is Jesus. Jesus was born sinless. He lived sinless throughout His life. He didn't deserve to die, but He chose to offer His life on the cross to die in place of everyone else who would put their faith in Him. You see, what He did is He died on the cross, shed His blood, He was buried, and on the third day, He was raised from the dead. He came back to life and ascended to God's right hand in heaven, and He forever lives to be the atoning sacrifice for sin and to reconcile us to God.